Hello, my friends. I know I've said this at the beginning of a lot of different videos, but I'm going to say it again here. I wanted to try something different and do more of like a free-form expression of thoughts about the Super Mario RPG Remake, and just talk over some gameplay. I'm not going to try and match up what I'm saying to what you're seeing in order to make this a very quick edited video for once. I just want this to be a quick one before going to work on the next card videos. But I do want to give some personal backstory to explain my thought process, but if you only want to hear me talk about my thoughts on the remake, just skip to this time. I also haven't watched any reviews of the game myself, so I'm basing it on my own experience only. Apologies if I get something wrong. So if you don't know, Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars is my favorite game of all time. It's not a Pokemon game, not a Resident Evil game, or even Metroid or Zelda, it's Mario RPG. Sometime in the summer of 1996, my friend Shane and I went with my mom to the local grocery store, and at that point they actually had a movie and video game rental store in the middle of it. Very weird to think about now, especially when I go back in there. Anyway, Shane was spending the night that night, and we were allowed to pick one game to rent. This box art was so colorful and inviting, and having no access to the internet or anything at that point, we kind of rented it on a whim. But it seemed like a safe bet because it's a Mario game. My experience with RPGs at that point was so limited that I pretty much remember watching my brother play Final Fantasy I years prior, and that was about it. So we took Super Mario RPG home for that 2-day rental or whatever it was, and probably played it until it was way too late in the night for us 10-year-olds to be staying up. I was so ensconced in everything about this game. The characters, the dialogue, the enemies, the timing mechanics, the music. Good lord, the music. I loved everything about it. So the weekend came and went. We did not beat it. Shane went home and we returned the game, and then months and months go by. Enter the Christmas season, and the only thing I had on my Christmas list that year was Super Mario RPG. I was, of course, a very grateful child for what I had, but if there was ever going to be a Christmas to get the one single thing I wanted, it was going to be this one. December of 1996 took absolutely forever to get through. I even remember seeing a gift under the tree of something that looked suspiciously like the shape of a Super Nintendo game box, so I was confident that that was it. But I would walk by, hearing its siren song calling through that reindeer wrapping paper. I had to be sure. But I couldn't just peek inside, could I? I remember one night while my mom had a friend over and they were in the kitchen, I literally crawled behind the couch against the wall to not be seen to reach out and grab the gift, slowly tearing back the tape just to see what it was. What I saw was indeed Mario's Missing. Okay, no, it was obviously Mario RPG. That was such a memorable Christmas for me, and I proceeded to play this game an absolute ton in the following months. I explored and hunted for all of the secrets I could find. The hidden chests, the extra items, the secret casino, whatever that thing was that was behind the sealed door in Monstro Town. I could not get enough of this game. Again, no internet or anything. I would even play through doing the voices of all the characters, trying different team combos, everything I could do. And it was years later when I would play through the game again and all that magic returned, and I could safely say that it had to be my favorite video game of all time. So fast forward a bit to, well, 2023. I'm at work when I hear the announcement of a remake of Super Mario RPG. I know there were rumors about it, but to actually see it was legit happening, I could not believe it. The spiritual sequels of the Paper Mario series never really quite gelled with me, so I just assumed Mario RPG was going to stay in its place in time, and that was it. The Paper Mario series continued on, and it seemed like that was the direction they wanted to stick to. But nope, this was happening, and it was happening in November. But the thing is, I'm just not much of a gamer anymore. Blame it on my age or limited free time or whatever, but my free time is focused more on other things lately in the last few years. Here's a quick list of every video game I played this entire year, if you don't count the Pokemon TCG challenges for my videos. Pokemon Sun for only about an hour, and only my second attempt playing this game since its release. Pokemon Scarlet for a second playthrough that I never finished, but still played for a handful of hours. Tools Up, a fun yet addicting co-op game that my wife and I downloaded for $1.99. She is most certainly not a gamer, but got really into this game. I recommend it, we had a lot of fun. And finally, the one anomaly here, the Resident Evil 4 Remake, in which I beat it 3 times back to back to back on different difficulties. What a top tier RE game. My point is, I just really don't play a lot of games anymore. And that's it, except for this remake of Mario RPG, which I will now get into. I just wanted to preface my thoughts so you know where I'm coming from. A remake of my favorite game of all time, but placed in a time period where I don't really play video games much anymore. So I decided I wanted to break this down into 4 sections. Positives, mixed, negatives, and final thoughts. Here's what I think. So I think the most obvious positive here is the visuals. While I don't think they're perfect, and I'll get into that soon, I think the character models here look pretty excellent. But this is pretty much par for the course here and nothing that shouldn't be expected. It's comparing Switch graphics to Super Nintendo. Even though nothing beats the SNES game for me, I would be lying if I didn't say that it could be difficult at times to really make out what some of the enemies look like. This remake does an excellent job giving every character features that you can actually see, and this is especially clear in the mini cutscenes that play now. Mac in the Mushroom Kingdom, for instance, I never knew it was this little red guy on top of the sword. I always assumed Mac was just a sword with eyes because it was too hard to tell. But in this, now renamed Clay Morton, it's so obvious to see this little red demon thing on top. Looking at images from the SNES version now, I can totally see it, but it took until this remake for me to fully realize it. So yeah, I really love the clarity of all of the enemy models here, and even the good guys. Everybody looks excellent. I also really love how they implemented the combat here. The turn-based combat in this game absolutely focuses and relies on timed hits. Every time you use a move, especially physical attacks, you're supposed to hit the A button at the exact time to deal more damage. This is how it was in the original game, and I feel like it's implemented even better here. Sometimes you'll see a little exclamation point above your character's head, and that is the exact moment you're supposed to hit A. Sometimes it doesn't show up at all, and you gotta rely on your timing instincts. It took me a little bit to get used to Mario's jumps, where you can combo a string of many jumps in a row if you time it right. It just feels better here than it did in the original game, and I think all of the timed hits do. There were still times, even late in the game, where I would get the timing wrong, and I do not blame the game for it, that's on me. But that makes it feel more fair and realized, even more than the original. Another huge positive for me, and it might not seem like much, is the inclusion of the option for modern or classic music. For me, the music in this game is absolutely iconic. Yoko Shimomura knocked it out of the park with the music in the original. I can still hum tunes in my head from almost any area in the game. I started playing the remake with the modern music for something different, but switched it to the classic by the time I got to like Rose Town. I couldn't resist. But having the option there is perfect. I will say though, hearing the exact same battle and victory music so many times can feel very repetitive, to the point where my wife asked me to turn the volume down at times. But that's just how it is with turn-based RPGs. That's not isolated to this remake by any means. I also really love the simple addition of the Pokédex-style journal of a monster list. This is normally not something I would care about, but I actually found myself wanting to encounter every enemy to fill out the journal. It shows their HP, weaknesses, how much experience they give, and where they are, and a little blurb about them. Very much like the Pokédex. Toward the end of the game, I went through all of the enemies I found to read all of their little blurbs about them, some being pretty funny. It made me excited to encounter new enemies, like a little side goal to aim for. And my final positive for me is going to be, and call this lame if you want, but just the fact that this exists. The original is 27 years old at this point, with what seemed like it permanently existing in the past. Everyone knows that Paper Mario is kinda like the spiritual sequel to it. Not a literal sequel, but just kind of a different direction that went off of what Mario RPG built. And here we are with pretty much the exact same game with modern visuals on the Switch, making access to legitimately playing the game accessible to everybody that owns or can play a Switch. And I love that this is a thing. But that does lead me to the mixed category. This really is so close to the original game that it was actually a little disappointing to me at times. Don't get me wrong, I didn't really want this to be so different or anything. It is my favorite game after all. But I still couldn't help but feel like maybe some new stuff here. The new stuff pretty much boils down to the gauge meter, being able to switch party members in battle, and some minor tweaks here and there to names and dialogue. That's not every change, but I don't know, I'm conflicted on it, hence it being mixed for me. I was honestly a little surprised after my first hour at how close it was to the original, down to little nuances that I picked up on. Reactions, how certain things looked, etc. Another mixed one for me actually goes back to one of my positives. I said I absolutely loved how clear the character models are here and the inclusion of cutscenes. All of that looks excellent. But some of the backgrounds, at least for me, didn't look as amazing as opposed to the original game. Back then, it was pretty amazing to see what they were able to pull off graphically with the Super Nintendo, so I still feel like I wanted a little bit more from the environments here. I still put this in mixed because some areas really do look awesome. Some of the areas in the forest maze, for instance, wow, that looks so good. But then like Bandit's Way, I think it just looks good. On to the negatives, and yeah, it really does pain me to say this, but I am just not a fan of the inclusion of the gauge meter. I didn't look too much into anything about this game prior to getting it, as I wanted to go in as fresh as possible, so I didn't know this meter would be a thing. So when the game explained what it was, I was like, oh cool. I assumed some enemy encounters would be more difficult, and especially boss fights, giving me more of an incentive to get the timed hits to build this meter up. So I saved it for the fight against either the Hammer Brothers or Croco, I can't remember, and it was cool to see, but then the boss fight was over way too quickly. For the rest of the game, I only ever bothered to use the charge attacks to A, see what they looked like, and B, I did use it against Smithy at the end, a fight that I still beat on the first try. The idea of this is pretty cool, but I personally feel like it did not laterally match a difficulty scale, and it felt way too easy to build it back up to 100. Another negative, and this may just be for me personally, is the option of switching characters mid-battle. Some people might praise this inclusion, but I personally didn't like it, and that just may be due to my style of play. Before the game came out, I kept thinking of who my team was going to be, much like planning out a Pokemon team. One of the fun replayable aspects of the original was that you can play through it using Mario, Geno, and Bowser, and then the next time try out Mario, Bowser, and Peach, and so on. My personal preferred team was always Mario, Mallow, Bowser, treating it like Mallow is the red mage, Bowser is the warrior to equate it to Final Fantasy. Mario has to be on your team no matter what, so I always viewed it through that lens. Peach is like the white mage, Geno is like the black mage, at least to me. So I contemplated team ideas, getting excited for this release, and said that my first time playing should be with my favorite team combo of Mario, Mallow, Bowser. But this game doesn't want you to pick a team, it wants you to use all 5 members. If someone goes down, you're intended to switch out for the other members. And I still didn't want to play this way. I stuck to only using Mario, Mallow, and Bowser, save for only 2 occasions the entire game. Well, technically 3. When you first get Geno, you have to use him until you get Bowser. But aside from that, I got one single game over the entire game, thus I was forced to bring in Geno and Peach for that fight. The only other time was fighting Culex in the post-game. I ran out of pick-me-ups and had to use Geno and Peach there too. I don't know, I didn't want this to be a thing, but I fully understand why they did it at the same time. Story-wise, you are a traveling team of 5, so you're meant to include everybody in some way. So that's pretty much just a personal negative for me. Blame it on nostalgia or blame it on Pokemon skewing the way I want turn-based RPGs to be, but it's just how I feel. And my final negative kind of piggybacks off of that. I found this game to be way too easy. The original game already wasn't that difficult, but my god. And there even is an easy mode added on here. I can't even imagine what that's like. But yes, I absolutely realize that I know this game in and out, and that can't be helped. I know where to go, when bosses appear, and all of that, so it has to be part of it. But man, like I said, I only got one game over the entire time, and that was against one of the treasure chest fights in Bean Valley. I think I got hit with too many water blasts or something, and it took me out. But aside from that one time, and the final fight against Smithy, I never once, the entire game, felt like I was in danger of losing. I stopped using the meter attacks altogether and I still felt like it was too easy. I was even torn on if I should be fighting enemies or just skipping them entirely to not get as much experience or levels just to add to the challenge a little bit. As I said, the original game was already pretty easy, but I still remember having to do some fights a couple times. The Yaridovich fight always sticks out to me as being pretty difficult, and now renamed Spiritovich, I beat him so fast that I couldn't believe it. Every single late game fight, save for Smithy, I was never even close to losing, and that simply is a negative for me. It's always very challenging for RPGs to walk that very fine line of not being too easy or frustratingly difficult, so I get that. I never even finished Final Fantasy 2 or 3 because I got to the point at the end where grinding out levels would have been my only way to win, and it just didn't sound like anything I wanted to spend time doing. So I also don't want an RPG to feel like a time waster in order to win. But the original Mario RPG, while definitely on the easier side, still felt much closer to being in that fine line than this remake did. I would say the original game is absolutely perfect as an introduction to the RPG genre, but that could also be my bias talking. That's pretty much how it was for me. But also, like, the difficulty never really felt like the focus of the game at the same time. It's all about having fun and the charm of the story and characters and the humor. Unfortunately, it being too easy did affect my enjoyment, and that really sucks to say. Which does kind of bring me to my final thoughts. I love so much that this remake exists, that Mario RPG got its resurgence and can now be played by people who never played it before. It looks so good for the most part and is a general improvement over the original in every way graphically. I do think it's way too easy, and I can't even imagine how easy the easy mode is. It seemed like you'd just be playing it on rails or something. But in the end, it's so close to being the exact same game, and I can't really complain about that at all. It's like if you have a favorite restaurant that got renovated, but also some new chefs. It'll look fantastic, but there are some new people using those same recipes. I can't not recommend you getting this game if you're any bit of a Mario fan or an RPG fan. Just know that it's going to be a very breezy playthrough, and that's okay sometimes. If you've never experienced the original game, this will still be an excellent introduction to it. But me personally, I do not think it replaces the original as the ideal experience, and I will fully admit that it's probably my nostalgia talking there. I can't help it, this game just means so much to me in my childhood. But really, you can't go wrong with either one. The difficulty for new players would probably come into play by not knowing what's next or not being able to properly prepare for what's to come. So I say it's a very high recommendation for new players and still a fun nostalgic trip for veterans. Maybe I need to play the SNES version again though to really get a proper comparison in. It's been years since I played it now. So yeah, thanks for listening to this little side video I decided to do. Next time, it'll be back to more card videos. I gotta continue the set release order with Base Set 2 and Team Rocket next, as well as doing some gym leader ranking videos. Check out the Paraspectre Patreon, my Bonfire store, or just say hi. Thanks again to everybody who has helped the channel out, and I thank you all so much. Paraspectre will return.